Let's go. All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of the Amateur Experts Podcast, where we're experts of nothing. So, but mainly we just want to talk football with you guys. This is Landon Oliver here with my co-host, Andrew Scott.
What's popping? How's it going?
It's going good, man. How's everything going with you?
It's going good. Before we get into anything, there are some congratulations in order. This is the first time I've talked to you virtually face to face since New Year's. So
Yeah.
my man is engaged to the love of his life. So
Yes.
big time moves, man. Congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Thanks, man. It's been a whirlwind the last few days, definitely, but it's exciting and
Right.
man, I'm so excited. I couldn't be happier with how everything's going, and it was a great way to kick off, the year. So, but not only did I get engaged, more importantly, more importantly, the Colts made the playoffs. So let's get into the real congratulatory stuff here.
Your fiance don't listen to this, does she?
Not yet, but she's in the next room, so I'm sure. I'm
Make sure
surprised I haven't got a comment yet.
make sure she skips this episode.
Yeah.
Speaking of keeping them happy, I had to go. The reason I just ran off is because my kids are in their room going nuts right now, and my wife's asleep. She's got to be up here soon, so we might have some guests popping up behind me, or I might have to just dip to tell them, calm down. It's nighttime. So if I run off or if they pop in, that's why. So same thing. Just trying to keep the lady happy.
Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do, man. It's all good either way. Man, so what a weekend. Crazy weekend. Crazy. There's a lot of crazy games, and then on top of that, just in general, things kind of shook out the way we thought it would. But there was some worry there for a little while. Kind of what I know right now, we've got the playoff scenarios pulled up here in front of us that we're looking at. So in the AFC, we have Chiefs with the first overall seed, which means they get the bye week. And then, if you don't know already, they added an extra seed. So now there's 7 playoff seeds with the bye week going away for the second seed. And we're going to have 3 games this coming up weekend per conference for the wild card. So the Chiefs get the number 1 seed locked up. They took care of that last week. Bills number 2. Steelers locked up number 3. Titans took care of business. It's tough to talk about. They locked up AFC South with number 4. Ravens got in with a win. They took 5. Browns got in with a win, barely against the Steelers B squad.
Right.
They took number 6, and then of course the Indianapolis Colts took number 7. We snapped with a win against Jacksonville. Thank you, Jonathan Taylor. I love you.
And thank you, Josh Allen and the Bills, for handling business on their end too.
I know,
knocking out Miami.
Yeah, we definitely owe them. And actually, there was a bunch of Colts fans, kind of including myself, that donated to the charity that they support for.
Oh, that's awesome!
Out. So that was really
very
cool.
Nice.
Yeah, it was really cool of them to do and help us get in. So we figure we can pay it forward. But from now on, for the next week or so, sorry you guys are going down. And so
let's talk about it.
Yeah, I was saying on the AFC side, what are you looking at here?
All right, so let's start. We get to wait one more week to talk about who gets to lose to the Chiefs. So dropping down to the next game right below the bye week, you got the Bills and the Colts. So as much as for you, I wish I could, I could pick them for you. The Bills are the hottest team in football right now. I do think you guys might be one of, if not the toughest matchups for them, because you guys have a team built to keep Josh Allen on the sideline and Stephon Diggs on the sideline. I think, for somebody to beat the Bills or the Chiefs, really, that's the recipe you're going to need. So I do think it's going to be a really good game. But with the momentum they have right now, with how hot they are, with how much confidence that Josh Allen is playing with, it's tough for me to see them getting dropped in the first round. So I'm going, and just for the record, we're gonna start our own little pick 'em contest where we're gonna track picks, throughout the playoffs, and then next year pick it back up full swing for the full season. But so for this game, I'm sorry to say, but I'm gonna be picking the Bills.
Yeah, look, fandom aside, looking at this realistically as a football fan, there's not many ways that you can think of the Colts beating the Bills without Philip Rivers having basically his game of the year, which means avoiding turnovers, which is something he's been pretty decent at this season. Especially later on in the season. I know he had one
Yeah.
Sunday that it didn't really look all that great, but for the most part, he's done a pretty good job of limiting turnovers. But yeah, with Josh Allen playing the way he has, I think our defense is built really well as far as we can stop the run. We can try to keep him contained with DeForest Buckner and the defensive line. Try not to let him get into those scenarios where he's just rolling out and creating on the fly. And Xavier Rhodes has been an amazing cornerback this year for us. That was such a great pickup by Chris Ballard. I think he can kind of stay in front of Diggs for the most part. I mean, I don't really know if he can stay in front of him, but I think we can kind of limit his production possibly. I think where it gets kind of dicey for the Colts, just looking back, seeing how the Bills attacked Miami and how they've kind of attacked people the last few weeks, has been the middle of the field. And that's been the Colts' biggest weakness area, because obviously they have Darius Leonard there, who is, by all accounts, one of the top 2 to 3 linebackers in all of football.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, the coverage in that area of the field is pretty lackadaisical because the offense that they run, that Tampa 2, uh, almost like that old Seattle style is what they kind of want to play. And that was where you could beat Seattle at, was you wouldn't test the edges because you had Sherman and Browner and those guys, and you wouldn't test them deep because you had Earl Thomas. So what you would do is you would try to attack the middle of the field. And that's where the Bills excel out. That's where the Colts' weakness is on defense. I think that's a really bad matchup for the Colts, and I think they're going to get eaten alive in the middle of the field. But so our only chance is Rivers has to produce in the red zone, which is something that we have not done well this year. We're one of the worst red zone offenses in football. We can always get down there. We just can't get into the end zone. So the only way the Colts win, Rivers protects the ball. We get touchdowns instead of field goals, and we kind of limit those deep, big shots that they like to take to Stephon Diggs and John Brown and some of those other guys they have.
Right.
Outside of that, we need to run the ball as much as we can with the beast, Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
Keep Josh Allen nice and comfortable on that bench, nice and cold in that Buffalo weather. And hopefully Frank Reich can go back into his old stomping ground and get a victory. But if we're going for the record here, I do think the Buffalo Bills pull this off. I don't see any way, with as hot as they are, I don't see any way them losing in the first round, kind of like you alluded to. So I'm going to take the Buffalo Bills as well.
Yeah, and unfortunately, if they do end up getting Cole Beasley back, that part of the field that you're talking about them attacking, you got a guy that just does not drop passes, catching balls in that area. Their tight end group really isn't that bad. Dawson Knox is a decent young tight end, and then Isaiah McKenzie, he's a nice young receiver in his own right. So I mean, even if Diggs is limited, they've still got some nice options for Allen to throw to. So it's going to be a tough passing attack to stop, especially with how well Allen's playing. So I mean, I agree.
All right, well, let's move on to our next game. We have the 3 seed Steelers in a rematch of this last Sunday's game against the 6 seed playoff Cleveland Browns. Something we haven't been able to utter in a long while.
Right. Yeah.
So that's exciting. How do you see this one shaking out?
I want to pick the Browns so bad, man. I mean, this is only like the second time the Browns have made the playoffs since they, came back as the Cleveland Browns. And it would be a cool story, but with Big Ben back, even with the way that they've kind of struggled as of late, I think if they can even just play on par to how they played against you guys against Indy, I think it's going to be tough for Cleveland to keep up. I mean, if Cleveland can, if they can use Chubb and Hunt in that run game, and they can do kind of what I think the Colts need to do to beat the Bills and keep them on the sideline, then they might have a shot. But I do think that the Steelers defense, even with the injuries that they have right now, I still think that they're a tough unit to beat from start to finish, especially whenever they're going to be as motivated as they are here in this playoff game. Against a division rival on top of that, as if they needed any more motivation. But I think those factors, and then just Big Ben being back and the experience he brings to the table, I do think, especially with how close the game was last week, with the Steelers not really having much to play for and the Browns fighting for their life against the Steelers team without Big Ben, I don't think the Browns are going to be able to hang in there for the full game. I do think it'll be close, but I got the Steelers winning.
All right. Yeah, and just to kind of echo those sentiments, the Browns as well, with Big Ben back, they actually took a pretty big blow today from what I read earlier with Olivier Vernon having an Achilles injury. So he's out for the season. So that defensive line takes a hit as well, which means more focus is going to go on Myles Garrett. I'm actually going to take the Browns here. I'm actually going to take Cleveland Browns in a shocker. The Steelers, man, and I know last week they had their B team in, and you're playing second stringers, and the Browns struggled with the second string. Man, I just get this feeling the Steelers are due for another one of these, bad losses, which over the last month and a half of the season, they've kind of had a penchant for.
Yeah, they've been good at that lately.
Even with the Colts victory that they had, I mean, that the first half of that game, they looked absolutely horrendous. And the Colts are more of the reason why they didn't win that game than the Steelers making that comeback, because the Colts started playing that prevent soft coverage, and they gave Jonathan Taylor 4 touches in the second half. And he basically ate them alive in the first half. So I think if the Browns can avoid that mistake, ride Chubb and Hunt, through the whole game, kind of limit, have Baker limit turnovers and find a way to mitigate the loss of Vernon and get a little bit of pressure on Big Ben. I think the Browns can come away with this game, and I fully expect them to do that. I think it's going to be a tough, hard-fought game because it's a divisional game, and most divisional games are always close, no matter who's playing. It's always a fun matchup, but I like Cleveland to come away with this one. I'm pretty excited to watch it.
All right, I like it. I like we already got some differences in our pick'em here. All right, so this next game is, before we started this, I wrote down all of my picks, and left a space, to write down yours. And this is the one game where I left it blank and I hadn't wrote it down because I still haven't really made up my mind. And this is easily the hardest game for me to pick of this wildcard weekend. So I'm gonna let you go first on this one. I'm gonna let you see if you can sway me in one direction or the other. So we got the 4 seed Titans playing at home against the 5 seed Baltimore Ravens. So how do you see this breaking down?
Well, so both of these teams are very similar. They like to run the ball. Basically, their entire offense is predicated on running the ball. And the big difference between these two teams is the Ravens have a good defense. The Titans do not have a good defense.
Right. Yeah.
So as we know, when it comes to the playoffs, defense wins ball games. You win ball games by running and keeping your opposing team, off the field, limiting scoring, and playing good defense. And if you want to talk about the Buffalo Bills being the hottest team in football, I think it's a 1A, 1B conversation with the way Baltimore's been playing over the last 2 months of the season.
Yep.
That is a very, very hot team going into Nashville. And the Titans have been in a lot of one-score, really close games against some pretty bad teams this season. So, and I'm trying not to let my fandom affect it, because we all know, and actually, in all honesty, I really don't mind the Tennessee Titans. It's just some of the fans are a little unrealistic. But even fandom aside, I think that's going to be a very, very tough game for Tennessee. to win. And I think there's an extra motivational factor due to the Titans being the ones that knocked them out last
Last
year.
year, right? Yeah.
So they're going to want to go in there and prove a point. They finally phased Mark Ingram out of the run game. They can ride J.K. Dobbins, who absolutely blew up on Sunday.
Yes, he did.
Had a fantastic game. He's been looking really great. Gus Edwards, of course, has looked really good as well. And Lamar has been making very good decisions as of late here. This is
Yeah.
going to be the biggest game of his career going through last year. And we all know that he kind of has a penchant of, once they get down, and that's the biggest thing that the Titans can do to beat the Ravens right now is get a lead, because once you
Right.
get down and force them to throw the ball, that offense falls apart.
Yep.
So I think for the Titans to win, it's almost like what we've said the entire time. I think they need to go through Derrick Henry, and Ryan Tannehill has been absolutely fantastic this season.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, he's been fantastic the last 1.5 years, since he took over from Mariota. So I think, they're more balanced on offense. They have, by, metric standards, they have the best offense in football. But I'm really concerned about that defense, and especially that secondary. And
Yep.
Hollywood Brown has been playing really good here, the last few weeks. It's going to be a tough game for Tennessee. It's a toss up to me, but I think if I had to choose a team right now to go in, I'm going to take the hotter team with the better defense, and that's going to be the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, so that was you almost said word for word kind of what I've been thinking is, I mean, they're both extremely similar offenses. We're going to see a lot of running and a lot of play action, and whenever it comes down to it, one team has at least a good defense, even if you don't want to call them great. They were great to start the season. They've had some struggles, bits and pieces, but there hasn't been a point in the season whenever you would even consider calling the Titans defense good. So there's a clear gap on that side of the ball, but just watching how well Ryan Tannehill's played this year, and watching, his connection with AJ Brown continue from last year, and then Corey Davis having a Devontae Parker-ish, late career, like, was it 4th or 5th year breakout, kind of like what Parker did last year.
Yeah.
You're seeing that kind of added element to the offense that wasn't there last year. And then Derrick Henry, Henry 2K, breaking that mark this year, and just how well he again is playing. It's really hard to pick against them, even with the defensive struggles. So you know what? I just talked myself into the Titans. I'm gonna pick the Titans.
Hey, there you go.
I think that this is probably going to be the closest game. I would be shocked if this ended up being a blowout one way or the other. But I think that the Titans have an offense that is playing on another level this year compared to last year, even with the defensive struggles. I think the offense, if they can start off strong, kind of like how you already said, if they can start off strong, if they can kind of build a lead, I think they're built to hold that. And I'm gonna go with the Titans. I'm gonna pick the Titans in this game.
All right. So that takes care of our AFC wildcard preview. Let's move over to the NFC, where we have the Green Bay Packers securing that 1 seed last week with a victory over the Chicago Bears. Number 2, we have the New Orleans Saints. Number 3, the Seattle Seahawks. 4, the 6-10 Washington football team with that lovely NFC East. Number 5, we have the surging Buccaneers. 6, we have your Los Angeles Rams, Andrew. Congratulations.
Hey, thank you.
And number 7, taking up the rear, we have the Chicago Bears. The Bears. So
Bears.
So let's see here. Obviously, like Kansas City, Green Bay locks up the 1 seed, so we don't have to worry about them. So that leaves our first game on our list here that we're going to cover is Saints and Chicago. So this is going to be surprising. I'm probably going to get ridiculed. This is my upset of the week. I'm locking it down. The Chicago Bears go into New Orleans and eliminate the Saints.
Okay. All right. Tell me more.
Yeah, so it's very bold. It's just, man, I don't know if it's that New Orleans voodoo, or I don't know if Drew Brees pissed in somebody's Cheerios or something. Uh, but man, like just counting on the Saints in the playoffs here recently has just not been a very smart decision. And with the way the offense is going for the, which of course, they ran into a buzzsaw with Aaron Rodgers last week. So, I mean, you know, you can't really blame them for that. But I think with the way that David Montgomery has been a revelation here the last month of the season, they're running the ball really well. Mitch Trubisky is playing really well also. I know Allen Robinson didn't have the greatest game, but of course he's always a big threat. Jimmy Graham looks like it's 2011 all over again. Uh, their offense is really taking that next step. And then you combine that with, we know what the Bears defense is. We know what they've been, and that's been the only pretty much bright spot on that squad. So all they were waiting on was for the offense to catch up to the defense. And they seem to have caught up. And going into New Orleans, with no fans, I think that's where it's really going to hurt them is with the COVID. They're not they're not in that stadium. It's nice climate controlled. There's none of this crazy outdoor weather, which conversely could help the Saints as well. But I don't think it's going to be a worry of going in. And this goes for pretty much all the other teams, especially the ones playing indoors, is this year going into the playoffs, you're not having to worry about, going into a hostile environment this year, which is pretty. I think it's going to cause a lot of wild games coming up here
Yeah.
this next weekend because they're not going to have that playoff feel. They're going to have that preseason feel, which, I mean, they'll have the playoff feel because you're going to have, all these teams that are left in here, minus probably a couple teams, are really, really good teams. So, you're going to have those teams battling each other, but you're not going to have that home field advantage like you would have in previous years. And I think this is where the Bears, maybe the Saints are overlooking them as well because, they're saying, oh, well, Chicago, they weren't that good to start the season. They're not that good. We can wait and, see who we're going to get, whether it's, Tampa Bay or the Rams or Seattle or somewhere like that. Um, I don't know. I've got a weird feeling, like in all honesty. There's no rhyme or reason. I've got a feeling, so I'm gonna take the Bears.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I like it. It was I forget what I was watching today. I think I was just watching Sports Center, and it was last night, and Matt Hasselbeck was on Sports Center with Scott Van Pelt, easily the best Sports Center show that they put out, and he's talking about the most intriguing matchup on the NFC side from Wildcard Weekend, and he picked the same game and said that there was a good chance for the Bears to take down the Saints for a lot of the same reasons you mentioned. So it is a bold call, but I don't think you're crazy by any means. But that being said, I am going to take the Saints to win this game. If you look at the Bears schedule, you kind of mentioned the running game and how David Montgomery has really played this back half of the season. If you look after their bye week, and they lost the first two games after their bye week, but if you look after their bye week, you've got Green Bay, Detroit, Houston, Minnesota, Jacksonville, Green Bay. So Green Bay twice in there. It was a great team, but a really bad run defense. And every other one of those teams, Detroit, Houston, Minnesota, Jacksonville, bottom of the league against the run. And now you're going into New Orleans where you don't really have the stadium factor, but you are now playing a defense that has been the number one defense against the run, arguably over the last 2 years. And I think it's going to be a lot tougher to run against this team than what they've had to deal with over the last, 5-6 weeks. I think it's going to be a lot more difficult for them to play to their strengths, and it's going to be more in Mitch's hands. And I think even if Breeze doesn't play well, I think that defense is really going to have a field day. And the Bears have a great defense in their own right, but I think the Bears defense is going to be spending a lot of time on the field in this game just because of Mitch not being able to move the offense, even though he has been playing better. I don't think that they're going to be able to get it done against this defense. I mean, spoiler alert, I'm only going to have the Saints win in this one game. So it's not that I think that they're, bound for the Super Bowl or anything like that, but just this particular matchup they drew, and all things considered on the defensive side of the ball with the Saints, I'm going to roll with them for at least this game.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, that's the logical explanation. That's what most people, if you were a betting man, that's what you would bet. So moving on to the next, which is going to be more of your world here. Seahawks, Rams, divisional, opponents now in the playoffs. How's this looking for you?
This one is extremely difficult for me. I have sometimes I have a hard time taking fandom out of conversations whenever we come to discussing, sporting events that involve my favorite teams. I've got my favorite team versus the team that I picked preseason to make it to the Super Bowl out of the NFC. So it's either I knock my favorite team out of the playoffs or I knock my Super Bowl pick out of the playoffs. And unfortunately, I'm going to be knocking my favorite team out of the playoffs. It's up in the air right now if it's going to be Wolford again or Jared Goff playing quarterback for the Rams in this game. They don't know if Goff's going to be back from his broken thumb. And honestly, I'm not even sure that it would be a good thing if he was after watching Wolford play this past week. There was just a sense of energy and excitement with the offensive side of the ball that we haven't seen in some time, just because of the mobility that Wolford has and the ability to extend plays and not be a statue behind center that we either haven't seen since the Rams transitioned to Goff. And there were plays where it was just, there was a third and 9 or 3rd and 10 where watching the play and watching the pocket collapse. If Goff's in there, that's a sack. And Wolford takes off and breaks off like a 10, 11-yard run and gets the first down and keeps the drive going. Made several throws on the run. Now, he did his very first throw. He threw a pick, and watching the game, I was like, oh, shit, here we go. But after that first mistake, he really settled in and started to play really smart football. And McVay really had he had the playbook open for him. I mean, Wolford completed, I think, 3 passes over 20 yards, 3 deep passes, whatever the stat is that, whatever the yardage is that generates that stat. And Goff had, I think, 3 of those the entire season up to this point or something like that. So, I mean, it's just like there was a faith there watching the game that McVay had in Wolford, that it doesn't seem like, I mean, if we get in 3rd and long situations before last week, McVay just throws a screen or runs the ball and just calls it a wrap. There is no chance. There is no 20-yard pass. And if we make a 20-yard pass play, it's on like 1st and 10 or 2nd and 5, something where if it isn't completed, oh, well, you got some more shots. They don't take those shots on 3rd down. So I think that I do think that this game will be a little more interesting if Wolford played. But the thing that makes it tough to pick against the Seahawks is their defense has pretty much been top 5 across the board since I believe week 10. After Dunlap really got introduced to the defense after the trade deadline, and they had guys get healthy and things like that. This defense that was kind of a joke to start the season has turned into a at least arguably top 5 defense over the last half of the season. You mix that with the fact that their offensive pieces are starting to kind of get healthy. My boy Rashad Penny's about to take over the playoffs. It's going to be wild to watch.
Heard that before.
Yeah, right. But all jokes aside, him, Chris Carson, they should be able to run the ball. And then you got, let Russ cook with Tyler Lockett, and who made a resurgence this past week. And then, of course, DK Metcalf. They've got the experience from Greg Olsen back. It just the improvements on the defensive side of the ball. And then I think this is the first time all season, I believe I think they might have played, they played like 5 snaps together or something like that, but their full offensive line that was their projected starters at the beginning of the year are all healthy for this game, for like maybe only the 2nd time the entire season, which is huge against the Rams defensive front and their ability to get to Russ. I mean, Donald has a huge amount of his sacks in his career have come against Russ, and they didn't play as well in the most recent matchup, but in week 10, I believe, whenever the Rams and Seahawks met, the Rams really did a good job of containing Russ, and that was the famous game where Donald didn't record a tackle or a sack or something, and everybody went nuts, and he's overrated and all that stuff, even though he continues to just do his thing and lead the league in quarterback pressures and be right there in sacks and things like that, even though he doesn't even play on the edge. But I'm not going to get on an AD rant. I'm going to save that, because we could spend a whole podcast talking about how annoying hearing people try to underappreciate Aaron Donald is. So all those factors considered, if I'm going on the record here, as much as it hurts me to say it, I'm gonna have to go with the Seahawks.
Yeah, and we're both picking up picking against both of our squads, and the wild card
Right. Yeah.
pretty tough. But I'm also going to go with Seattle in this. I think that it's just going to come down to Russell Wilson making more plays than whoever the Rams quarterback is, whether it's Wolford or Goff. It's just going to be tough for them to move the ball against Seattle's defense. Seattle's plays very gritty, grimy type of game, and it always surprises me because that's the way they want to win games. But if it comes down to it, man, if you want to get in a shootout with Russell Wilson with those weapons, it's generally not going to go too well for you. So, just to keep it short, because you pretty much just covered everything, I'm also going to take Seattle. And then we come to probably our least exciting game of the whole wildcard weekend here. We have the 6-10 Washington football team.
7-9. Give them
7-9.
credit.
Yeah, okay.
You gotta
7-9.
give them their love.
Forgot. Philadelphia quit yesterday.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
But that's another tale. But anyway, regardless, you have your NFC East champion by default. So whoever sucks the least,
Right.
taking on the pretty surging Buccaneers. And I don't know necessarily. Have we heard any news about Mike Evans? Have we heard anything about that situation?
I haven't seen anything. I'll let you kind of keep going, and I'll look and see if I can find anything real quick.
But I mean, well, in all honesty, there's not really much to say about this. You have as great as Alex Smith has been, and as great of a story as that is, a fantastic story. You're going against Tom Brady, and you're going against Tom Brady with those weapons, and who, basically just threw 40 something touchdown passes at the age of 43, and he's just been.
Right.
He's had a few rough games, and he's had some growing pains in this offense, but they're peaking at the right time, man. And that's what you don't want to face if you're a divisional champion, regardless of record. If you're a champion, you don't want to get one of these wild card teams that are hot. And it's kind of the same thing like we said for the Titans. The Buccaneers have a better defense, which granted Washington has a good defense of their own. Especially that defensive line, and they're really hyped up. That video Chase Young yesterday saying, we want Tom, like we want Tom. Be careful what you wish for, Rook, because
right.
That's going to be a little rough. So, I mean, I think pretty much the entire world, unless you're a family member or a player of Washington, is going to go with Tampa Bay in this. So, pretty easy call. I'm taking Tampa Bay.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to disagree. I mean, the reality is what Washington would like to do is, feed Antonio Gibson and eat up Tampa with short passes and things like that. But Tampa wants you to try to do that. They're great against the run. They're great in the short areas of the field. They really can be beat over the top. And Alex Smith, as great as Terry McLaurin is, Alex Smith really isn't built to do that. It's a great story with Ron and Alex Smith and what they've been able to overcome to get where they are. Even if Philly might have just handed them a playoff spot, that I'm kind of glad that they did. I hate it for the competitive side of the game, but it's great to see them in the playoffs.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, and so the Mike Evans thing, they're hopeful that he'll be able to play. He didn't suffer ligament damage based on the MRI, and so it's just a matter of if he can get up to game health. But even if Mike doesn't miss, or even if Mike does miss, I don't think that would change the outlook for either of us.
And I think this might be a blessing in disguise for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because I think, in all honesty, as disrespectful as this is, I think if you need to, you can rest Mike Evans for this game, and just kind of get him 100% for your next round, with a tough opponent. So you're taking the Buccaneers, I'm guessing.
Taking the Bucs. Yep. I'm going to take the Bucs on that one as well.
Okay, so that actually kind of concludes our wild card preview. So next, we are going to be dipping into the world of dynasty fantasy football, which is my favorite world to live in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can't get enough of it. So we're gonna cover some rookies that we're excited about, as well as go over last year's rookies. Now that the season has ended, and kind of see where our previous thoughts stacked up against how the season ended up playing out. And like I said, then we'll transition into this next year's rookies coming in and who we're excited about as well. So I know Andrew has some rookie rankings from last season that we're going to talk about.
Yep.
And
So I went on Pro Football Network and grabbed these just for just kind of a baseline of something for us to be able to talk to. And these were post NFL draft rankings, right after the 2020 NFL draft took place. And so we can kind of start at the top here, because I think this is where the discussion already begins, for now that we're post 2020 regular season, if these would look any different. So right at the top they had the top two running backs, which were shout out to Pro Football Network first for providing these rankings for us to dissect. But we had number one, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Kansas City took them with the last pick in the first round. And then you had the snowball effect of Damian Williams opting out of the 2020 season as well, which happened for some people. It happened after their rookie draft, but some people, it happened before. So that really shot him up rankings. So you had Clyde Edwards-Helaire number one, Kansas City running back, and then Jonathan Taylor, running back two, for the running back two on the rankings for your Indianapolis Colts. So I'm sure there's a lot of mystery with this one, but looking at this now, is Clyde Edwards-Helaire your running back one for this class?
um, you know, I think by no fault of his own is Clyde Edwards-Helaire moving down for me. I don't think it's because he's not a good running back. I think the Le'Veon Bell situation completely destroyed his value for this season. It was rough once Le'Veon got there. And before that, he was, very good breaking tackles. He looked like a very good pick. But that being said, I mean, Jonathan Taylor over the last, probably since week 10 on, has just looked like far and away not only the best rookie running back. I mean, outside of Derrick Henry and maybe, your Kamara, CMC, he looks like he's, a slam dunk to be a top 5 overall pick next year. Not even for rookies.
Yeah.
So I think it's clearly Jonathan Taylor has leapt, CEH as far as, your dynasty rankings and running back. But like I said, it's not, because of Edwards-Helaire, not being a good player. It's Jonathan Taylor is just taken off and looks like one of the best running backs in football. And
Right.
I think next season, especially depending on how the Le'Veon Bell situation plays out and all that happens, if they are able to give Clyde a bigger workload and get him in better, running situations, and some of it's just bad luck. Like his goal line luck this year was just absolutely horrendous, because he was getting all kinds of goal line carries and he just could not get into the end zone.
Yeah.
So I think some of that's going to even out as well. I think obviously Clyde will be better next year than he was this year, depending on the situation. But I think Jonathan Taylor is your locked and loaded, top 5 running back next season. He was third in the NFL in rushing yards, and that's not, that's with double digit touchdowns as well.
Right.
And that's with a very, very limited workload, mid-season. So, there were games that he was getting under 8 carries a game. And so I think with what he's shown, I'm pretty excited, which is it's funny that we're talking about this because you're a Clyde owner. I'm a
Yeah.
Taylor owner. So
Yeah.
how's that playing out for you being a Clyde owner and looking at this now? Because you had the number 1 overall pick last year. Like looking
Right.
back on it, are you taking JT like, with the way things played out?
Knowing what I know now, I would have taken JT. Yeah. Because I mean, I had the number one pick because I traded for it, not because my team performed to the point to where I earned the number 1 overall pick.
Right.
I was in win now mode, and as soon as Damian Williams opted out, uh, for COVID, and Clyde was kind of had a clear path to the running back one role for the best offense in football. And me, with even though it's a dynasty league, my main goal this year was, I'm all in to win this year with the roster that I had, and having that pick, it was kind of a no brainer for me at the time that, I'm going to take CEH, and get the lead running back for the best offense in football. With Jonathan Taylor at the time of our draft, you still had Marlon Mack in the way. You had Naeem Hines, who was still going to be a factor in the passing game, and then JT as well. So there wasn't as clear of a path to carries, even though there was no doubt of the player JT was. The path to the workload just wasn't there, and I was basically just following the carries at that point. Because to be honest with you, pre-draft, of the top 5 running backs, Clyde was 5 for me. I had, before they had their landing spots, I liked Swift the most. It was Swift, JT, Dobbins, Akers, and then CEH. But I think they're all great running backs. So, to say like 1 and 5, I don't think there's a humongous gap between them. But the landing spot for me was just too good to be true. The offense was really similar to what he was in LSU. So, but looking back on what I know now, JT would have been better down the stretch to give me a chance at the championship this year. And I agree with you, his long-term outlook, after how well he played, I think is better than CEH's as well. So knowing both of those things, I would say that Jonathan Taylor is running back 1 for this class. My main question for you is, I just named off those top 5 backs from this class. I want to extend it to 6, because I do not want to leave Antonio Gibson out, because he is just too much of a talent in his own right. You've got JT 1. Does Clyde slide in it too? Or if not, how far does he fall, between Dobbins and Akers
For me,
and Swift and Gibson?
And I also, because you're going to have a guy that's on lists like these, or, post draft lists, you're going to have a guy that was on none of these lists, and he deserves his due for being basically a top 5 running back all season in fantasy long. And I'm not even talking about rookies. I mean, overall. And that's James Robinson.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So looking back on this, even with Clyde, Clyde or James Robinson for you, where are you going with that?
As much as excitement as there is, look, and James Robinson looked great, and now he's going to have Trevor Lawrence under center. His situation should only improve. I might, this time next year, I might regret it, but just with the draft capital invested and the offense that he's in, and I can't see Kansas City re-signing Le'Veon, I'm still going to take Clyde over James Robinson.
Okay. Which, I mean, is fair. It's something I wanted to throw out there. So basically,
yeah, he deserves to be mentioned.
You're asking how far Clyde falls down for me. So, and it's really, and I feel bad because I own so many of these guys in our dynasty.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm a Jonathan Taylor owner, and on the same team, I do have DeAndre Swift, I do have James Robinson, I do have Antonio Gibson. So obviously, I'm going to be higher on those guys. I like Clyde. I would put him at 4. I think DeAndre Swift next season, now that Peterson's going to be out of the way, possibly, we don't know for sure, but I mean, also
who knows?
Point to them moving on. And then Matt Stafford, if he comes back, and depending on their draft investment, maybe offensive line, maybe something like that, I think Swift is poised for a huge season next year. Third, I would have Dobbins. I think J.K. Dobbins is going to get a huge workload as well, with Mark Ingram finally phased out. And even yesterday, we saw what he can do with limited carries. He had 13 carries yesterday. He had 160 something yards, and it was absolutely just a fantastic.
Granted, it was Cincinnati, but it doesn't matter what team it was. That line,
right.
that
still got to hit the pole. You still got to make guys miss.
Yeah,
he's been fantastic. So I'd put him 3. I think Antonio Gibson is it's going to be tough, because I think I would put Clyde above Gibson. The reasoning here is because we don't know what Washington looks like next year. We don't know if Alex Smith is back. We don't know if they've got a new quarterback. We don't know what's going to happen with the draft. And we don't know what's going to happen with that O-line. That offense is just completely up in the air. So for me, you know what you know what Kansas City is going to be next season. So I think
Right.
it's a safer pick to go with CEH over Gibson. But that being said, I think Gibson's poise. I mean, I still think Gibson's going to be, that high end RB2, kind of low end RB1 range. Uh, it's just with both these guys, it's just going to be a wait and see thing. So if I had to choose right now, I would take Clyde over Gibson. So Clyde would slot in at 4 for me. Gibson would slot in at 5.
So
James,
that puts Akers at 6, or is he behind James Robinson too? Is James Robinson at
yeah,
6?
I've got James Robinson at 6. I've got James Robinson above Akers. And people like to spout, the draft capital, and I understand. It's hard to believe in an undrafted free agent. That being said,
It happens.
yeah, I mean, it completely happens. And if you look at the metrics for the analytics and stuff like that, missed tackles, yards after contact, basically all the tough metrics you want your running back to excel at, James Robinson's right at the top of that list. And we're not talking about rookies either. We're talking about the whole NFL. So,
Right.
He's making guys miss. And that's with a huge workload on top of that. That's when teams are basically saying, like, dude, we know you're running the ball. So we're going to stack the box and try to make Mike Glennon beat us. And he's still out there
Right.
making guys miss and put numbers up. So I think with Trevor Lawrence back there, obviously it's only going to get better. I think as long as they don't draft a running back, maybe try to pair Etienne with Lawrence or something like that. I think as long as nothing like that happens, obviously I don't expect him to get the workload he got. I don't expect him to get, 30 carries a game like he did this season. But I think he's a very, very strong RB2 candidate next season. And I just, I trust my eyes. Watching him this year, being an owner of him, I watched a lot of James Robinson games. And if you would have told me that guy was, a second, third round pick, I wouldn't have known the difference because he's been that productive and that good looking. So
Right.
after that, I would take Akers. And that's mainly, that's nothing to do with Akers' talent. I think Akers is good. I think Akers has, a little bit of injury issues that are kind of rearing their head. And I hope it's not anything that's going to continue on. I hope he kind of gets it out of his system this year because he's had, I believe he's had concussion issues. He's had the ankle issues. He's had a few other just little nicks and stuff that I hope that he can get past. But outside of that, I just don't think that Sean McVay, and I think he was reluctant to do it with Todd Gurley. Yeah, I don't think he wants to give all the carries to one guy. You still have Henderson there. We'll see because you never know what they're going to do in the draft. If they drafted another running back in the second round, it wouldn't surprise me.
I would lose my mind. That's what I would
yeah,
do.
but you wouldn't be surprised. So you just almost never really know what they're going to do in the draft. But I think he's going to be more of a rotational guy with Henderson going forward. I don't think he's going to get the bulk of carries. I think both those guys, I think, which that's not saying, he's not going to get a lot of touches because I think there's going to be games where, he will get 20 touches, but there's also going to be games he's going to get, 8 to 10 touches. So you just kind of follow the workload at that point, and I don't think he has a clear path to the same workload that James Robinson does, which is my only concern.
That's fair. There's a little bit of difference in our rankings. So it was you had Jonathan Taylor 1.
Yeah, so I had Taylor, 2 I had Swift, 3 I had Dobbins, 4 I had Clyde, 5 I had Gibson, 6 Robinson, 7 Akers.
Okay. So if I had to order them, I would have Taylor 1 as well. I would have Dobbins 2. I would have CH3. I would have Akers 4.
Oh wow, Swift that far down.
I would have Swift 5, and then I would have Gibson 6, Robinson 7. Now Robinson, I could end up completely regretting because I agree that I think he's a great player, but him and Gibson both, I'm just really unsure about the situation. I think JT and Dobbins are locked and loaded to be just full workhorses next year. Mark Ingram's contract is very cuttable this offseason. Gus Edwards is a free agent. So, I mean, they could keep Ingram for depth, but, even if they do that, they've made it pretty clear that they like Dobbins a lot more than Ingram over the back half of this season. And I don't see them paying Gus after they've already got Ingram. If they do end up holding on to his contract, they got Ingram under contract, and then Dobbins has shown what he's shown, as good as Gus has been. I just don't see them paying up to keep him. So with Mac being a free agent, I can't imagine you guys paying him. So I think it's just going to be JT and Hines.
I think he could possibly. I think we possibly could bring Mac back because it was an Achilles rupture. And just being a good faith, kind of a 1-year deal, letting him kind of work himself back and seeing if he can be a rotational piece. But I think Jonathan Taylor's really got the workload next season.
Right.
So the thing with me, with Swift and Dobbins, why I reversed them, and truly it just comes down to this. And I know this is a weird thing because it's a double-edged sword. Lamar Jackson. So he's competing for carries with not only any other running back on the roster, he's competing with carries with his quarterback. And whenever your quarterback's running for 1,000-something yards, it caps how many touches you're going to get. So, yesterday he doesn't break that long, 70-something yard run. I mean, yeah, he's still having a good game. He's got 90-something yards, but he's not doing what he did. And to do what he did on 13 touches, I mean, it's just not going to happen every week. So
right, yeah, I agree with that. It's kind of a double-edged sword another way too, because we have a lot of, granted, I think Lamar is the first quarterback in NFL history to have back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons. So nobody's run it at a clip that Lamar has at quarterback, but we also have a lot of evidence that just pure fantasy-wise, having a running quarterback can also help the running back.
Yeah, which is what
the defense has to, it has to help. The defense has to focus on Lamar, which is just going to open up holes for Dobbins as well. And they run the ball more than, the only reason that doesn't concern me is if Gus is out of the picture and they turn Dobbins into a workhorse, they run the ball more than anybody in football. So even if Lamar is breaking off another 1,000 yards next year, I still think there's going to be more than enough room for Dobbins to get his, and establish himself as a top fantasy back.
Right.
And then
I'm still projecting him to be an RB1. This is not me saying that Dobbins is going to bust at all. I think he's. You're splitting hairs. I have a guy 2 and I have a guy 3,
Right. Yeah.
Very, very minimal for me.
Big difference in ours is where you have Swift and where I have Swift, and then where I have Akers and where you have Akers. So CEH,
what's your Swift hate going on here? What's going on there?
It's no hate, no shade. I told you before we started this discussion, Swift was my favorite running back coming out of the draft before he got drafted. And he's done nothing really to make me dislike, his game. I thought he looked great whenever he got the opportunities. But just there, and with a new staff coming in, who knows what's going to happen. But the current staff really had a hesitation to just hand him the keys. And even if AP goes away, I believe Carry-On's still under contract for 1 more year. And it wouldn't surprise me if they do let AP go away to see them bring somebody in. And we don't know what's going to happen with Stafford, if they're going to hold on to him or if they're going to. Honestly, I hope they let Stafford go and let him get a chance with a contender and them rebuild with somebody else. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen. It's all speculation.
I'd be happy with Matt Stafford in, a little bit darker shade of blue. Coming up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, my love of Matt Stafford, especially in our fantasy group discussions that we have, very well known. I think.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you. I love Stafford as well. But it's just kind of the unknown of the situation with him, where if I had to pick right now, that's the reason I have him there. It's not because of his talent. So with CEH, I don't expect Le'Veon to be back. I think that he will have a bigger role next year. And with it being year 2, I think that, he'll be able to kind of establish himself more in the offense. And then having Akers at 4, you really saw a shift here toward the end of the season, even with, I think it was week 2, he suffered an injury. The injury thing you're talking about is a real concern. And whenever he was out, Henderson kind of established himself as the lead back on that team for a little bit. But just watching the games, Henderson, he's a great running back. He's good at what he does, but I don't think he's a lead back. And I think he's great for change of pace. But the Rams really started to show a tendency of leaning on Akers, the last half of the season. He had the big breakout game against New England where he had, 30 carries, 100 plus yards. And then even if you look at just recently, this past game against Arizona, whenever they clinched their playoff spot, he missed the entire week of practice with one of those, knick-knack injuries, and they activated him. He played, and he still had like 21 carries. His yardage wasn't great because with Wolford in there at quarterback, Arizona was really just focused on stopping the run. They weren't dedicated to stopping the pass at all. But even after being out of practice for basically an entire week, they still were just giving Akers as much work as they could. And Malcolm Brown is a free agent. Malcolm Brown was a real touchdown vulture at the beginning of the year, and even some parts in the middle of the year. They like to use him a lot in the red zone, and I don't really think that they'll be bringing him back. I do think that it will still be a 1-2 punch with Akers and Henderson, but with the pattern they showed at the end of this year, I think they made it pretty clear that Akers is going to be the touch leader in that 1-2 punch, and just with the upside in the offense, and with the three-headed monster they had going earlier in the year, with one of those guys out of the picture next year, as long as they don't do something crazy like draft a running back in the second round again, which would blow my mind considering they have a third round Darrell Henderson, who they traded up in the third round to get, and then Cam Akers, who was second round draft value. With them having both those guys on the roster on rookie contracts, it would blow my mind if they drafted another running back. So just kind of the offense that they're in and the workload that they showed that they wanted to give him at the back end of the year. I'm pretty comfortable having Akers there. And then, so, my 5, 6, 7 is really just three guys who I love as players, but I'm kind of nervous about their situations, with Swift and Gibson and James Robinson. So I think that it's an incredible running back class, but I just don't know what to think about some of the situations. So I can end up being very wrong on those, but
Right.
Depending on how things shake out this offseason and things
So
like that. But that's kind of how I see it.
so let's play a little name game here. Now that we both have Jonathan Taylor at number 1, I'm kind of curious where you slot him in as far as overall running backs. So what I'm going to do is give you a few names and
Okay.
and see where you kind of view him at and this is strictly dynasty only. Like, this is, obviously it's going to affect next season, but dynasty.
Okay.
So Jonathan Taylor, Ezekiel Elliott.
Starting off tough already.
Yeah.
Are we assuming that Dak is back with the Cowboys?
We're assuming Dak's with the Cowboys. The offensive line's healthy. You taking Zeke or JT for dynasty?
I roster Zeke in our main dynasty league, so I
Which
feel like
is
you
why I
picked
had to
this one
throw
on
this out there. I'm
purpose.
curious.
But in the first 4 weeks of the season, Zeke was like a locked and loaded, like top 3 or top 4 running back. I think, before the Dak injury happened, he was popping off 17, 18 points a week, it seemed like. So this is really tough, but given the little bit of age difference and what JT showed the back half of the year, I think I would go Taylor.
All right. It's kind of where I was leaning myself. So Jonathan Taylor, Aaron Jones.
Are we assuming Aaron Jones re-signs in Green Bay?
Yes.
Okay, assuming he resigns in Green Bay, I think I would lean Aaron Jones. It seems like he's a lock for double-digit touchdowns, and as much as I love Jonathan Taylor, the player, I also love Aaron Jones, the player. I think he is a tremendous running back, and if we're assuming they re-sign Aaron Jones, I think that doesn't mean I think that means that they don't re-sign Jamal Williams, who's also a free agent. So granted, they did invest some decent draft capital in AJ Dillon. But I don't think A.J. Dillon is near as good of a running back as Aaron Jones is. So if they re-sign him, he's back in that offense. I think he's almost as close to a lock as anybody in football for 10 touchdowns, and he's great out of the backfield too. So if he gets locked up long term by Green Bay, I would have to go Jones there probably.
Okay. I think it's kind of splitting hairs here because I think they're very similar. I think for dynasty outlook, given the age difference and just basically kind of given the keys to the offense. I think Aaron Jones is a fantastic running back. I think I would have Taylor one spot ahead of him. Like it would be one of those where I would have Taylor like 4 overall behind,
Right.
of course, like Derrick Henry, Kamara, Cook, CMC, those type of guys. And then,
Yeah, I mean, Jones is 26 and Taylor's 21, so that's a significant. Like I had JT over Zeke, and Zeke's 25. He's a year younger
yeah.
than Jones is. So it's a really fair point, and I agree. I think that they're kind of neck and neck. But it's my
All right. So last one here, and these are both young guys. Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs.
Jonathan Taylor.
Okay, yeah, man, that didn't take you no time. I
No,
figured,
and I like Jacobs too. I'm a Jacobs fan. But I think that Jonathan Taylor I think he's definitely the more talented back between the two. As much as I'm a fan of Josh Jacobs, I do think he's a more talented running back, and he's going to be even if we don't know who's going to be under center, their offensive line is just too good, and he's too good, and with his age and everything, that one would easily be JT for me. Yeah.
yeah, I would obviously take Taylor in that scenario too. The reason why I wanted to kind of play this game is because one of the dynasty guys that I follow on Twitter, so they played a little game, and I know a lot of it is recency bias, but the results would be pretty surprising. Excuse me, be pretty surprising for you. He did a poll today that said startup draft dynasty, um, Christian McCaffrey or Jonathan Taylor.
Oh wow.
Yeah, 52% of a vote went to Christian McCaffrey, 48% Jonathan Taylor. So it was that close. They were literally just a couple points away from being tied in a dynasty startup draft, which just blew my mind that it was even that close, because you would think, over anybody, except maybe, Kamara or pretty much only Kamara you would have in the same level as Christian McCaffrey. So
I think Dalvin Cook is in that discussion too.
Yeah, it depends too, because their offensive coordinator, like if they get Jason Garrett, if they get or
surely
no,
they're
Gates,
just like doing their due diligence.
Yeah.
Surely they're just doing their due diligence, and they wouldn't do that. But
it's the NFL, okay?
I know.
But we don't know Dalvin's name. Plus, Dalvin's, he's getting up there as well. What is he? 25, 26 years old.
He's 25 as well, based on what I'm looking at. Yeah,
and he's got a lot of carries on him as well. But I mean, obviously, you're splitting hairs, but I think it's clearly, to me, it's clearly McCaffrey and Kamara at the top. And then that next level of guys, you got your Derrick Henry, your Dalvin Cook, your Aaron Jones, your Jonathan Taylors,
Nick Chubb.
Yeah, Nick Chubb's in there.
And then the forgotten man who hadn't played much this year, Saquon Barkley too.
Yeah. And that's kind of a weird scenario as well, because there was a lot of guys that I saw today that actually did dynasty startup drafts today. They started them, and a lot of these guys were picking Jonathan Taylor over Saquon Barkley, and it was surprising to me. To me, they're kind of tied. I think the talent is obviously there for both guys, but I think the offensive line scenarios and the quarterbacking scenarios, because even though, technically, I guess Daniel Jones is, a young quarterback for the Giants, I don't think he's necessarily the answer there in New York. So I think they're going to be looking for a quarterback sooner rather than later, as well as we are. So I think you're splitting hairs with either one of those guys. Plus, coming off that ACL, you don't know if he's going to be, the same. Obviously, it's not the same injury it was, 10 years ago, but it's still just kind of more of a safer pick for Jonathan Taylor to me. But I think if you're wanting, upside as far as this guy can finish as an RB1 on the whole season, I think Saquon's more than capable of doing that.
Right. So I know we're kind of getting to our closing point here. I'm assuming that alarm that went off was our 1 hour mark, right?
Yes.
Okay. So before we close, I think I was looking at this after you started playing the name game. So McCaffrey, Kamara, Cook, Aaron Jones are the only 4 I'm comfortable saying I would be okay with taking over Jonathan Taylor.
Yes,
He's
same for
he's right there in the mix with me with Saquon and Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb. I
yes,
think I think that's where he falls for me, is in that tier. Um, which is not a bad place to be in, considering
no,
how great those guys are at running back.
yeah.
But he has age on his side though, which I think kind of puts him on the front end of that tier of guys.
Yes, I agree. So, and that wasn't me wanting to, do like a whole JT segment, but I think because
No,
he was our consensus number one that we had. I
right.
think it's kind of interesting to compare him to some of these other top guys that weren't rookies, and to just kind of see where
Right.
he landed in there.
I mean, and it sheds some light on some other guys too, because I mean, you got like you saw that, like, Drew Brees might retire after this year, and you saw this, if for whatever reason they decided to just commit to Taysom Hill, you saw the fantasy struggles Kamara had with Taysom under center. And so I mean, if something like that was to happen this offseason and they did say Taysom Hill's our guy, I would probably have, I don't know if I would be as comfortable having even Kamara, even though I would probably put him at 2 right now with what we know. But it would really
Yeah, it
make
would
things
drop him down
much
to
more
about
difficult.
7 or 8 for me.
Right. So a lot can change, so it sheds some light on some other guys and their outlook too. So I think it's a good discussion to have.
Yes, and obviously we'll always get more into fantasy football. So just a quick little list here of guys that I would really like to touch on, but I think we're going to run out of time. But I am kind of curious as well. So can you throw up your 2021 rookie rankings, and we can just do a quick top 5 for where they fall for us?
Yeah. So I, just for transparency, I used the same site that gave us the 2020 rankings. So again, shout out Pro Football Network for putting this out there for us to take a look at. So my top 5 is actually pretty close to their top 5. So their top 5 is Etienne, Najee Harris, Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle for their top 5. My top 5 is Travis Etienne at 1, Najee Harris at 2, Jamar Chase at 3, Devontae Smith at 4, and then Rashad Bateman at 5. So the only one that I have any different than these guys is I'm basically switching 5 and 6. And I really want to just and I'll say at 6, I don't have. I say I'm switching 5 and 6, but 6 for me would probably be Rondell Moore, not Jalen Waddle either.
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly switching 5 and 6, but so my top 5 guys would be the same as these top 4, and then Bateman instead of Waddle.
Okay. And yeah, that's kind of where I fall. I think Etienne and Harris, depending on the landing spot, but the thing that Etienne has over Harris is an age factor as well. I think Etienne's going to be 21, and Harris is already 22, 23 years old. So I think he's got a couple years on Etienne right now. So I think depending on where they land, that could switch for me, especially like if Harris goes to a Pittsburgh or somewhere like that. I think he'd fall to my number 1. But Jamar Chase is clearly my wide receiver 1. Devontae Smith, that's where it just kind of gets a little interesting for me. I'm a huge fan of Devontae Smith, but I would have him at 5, just because I'm worried about his frame being as small as he is. If he could pack on 20 pounds and not lose any of that speed he has, I think that I would feel a lot more comfortable. But I've got him at 5, or at 5. Number 4 for me is a little bit of a surprise, but my wide receiver 2 is actually going to be Rondell Moore from Purdue.
I like it.
Which is another guy who's actually kind of a slighter frame as well, but of course, watching a lot of Indianapolis area sports and stuff like that, I watched quite a bit of Purdue games this year, and that guy just, even though he, obviously, he set out, most of the season and stuff like that, but every time I've watched him play, he's one of those guys that, I'll try to watch other guys, but for some reason I just keep, like, my eyes just keep going back to that. I'm just like,
he jumps off the screen, man.
Ridiculous, man. So I think I've got him right behind Jamar Chase at number 4, and then I've got Devontae at number 5. But like I said, that's always subject to change depending on landing spots. Just look at where we had Justin Jefferson. Of course, we had CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy above Justin Jefferson this last season.
Right.
And boy, that didn't work
Yeah,
out.
we didn't even get. We were talking
Yeah,
about 2020 rookies. We didn't even get into
yeah, we
receivers, so
didn't.
that's something we'll have to
Yeah,
save for
which have been
for
fantastic
next
receiver class.
podcast.
Yeah, which
Yeah,
we'll get into more for that, especially with me not only owning all those running backs, but I'm also a Justin Jefferson owner as well.
right. Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
so yeah, that was an interesting way to look at it as well. So what we'll do, we did our little top five here. I'd love to get more in depth, but we'll save that for another show whenever we can get deeper into it. So this
yeah,
will kind
yeah,
of conclude our wildcard weekend fantasy review of rookies for this last season and kind of prep, kind of where we're heading with rookies this coming up season. So I can't wait to get deeper in depth and
yeah,
enjoy
yeah.
it.
This time next week should give us a pretty good opportunity to talk about how these wild card games shook out. What our pick'em turned out to be, and then hopefully we can get into the 2020 rookie receivers with such a great class that we really didn't even touch on today. Kind of break those guys down similar to how we did the running backs, and then hopefully maybe get a little bit more in depth on this 2021 class as well, which is
Loaded.
it's another locked and loaded class, just like 2020. Man, these 2 years in a row here are a lot of fun for as far as dynasty goes. So it's really exciting to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to try to have new content out for you at least once a week. We're going to kind of shoot for Tuesdays as being whenever we release everything. That way, gives us a day after the games are played to kind of process and get the information out. And really look forward to doing this every week with you guys. Andrew, of course, it's always fun to do this, and we look forward to having some guests on here as well. So
Yeah.
this will kind of conclude episode 2. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and thank you for listening very much.